Ancient Greek humoral physiology. What is it actually? We've talked about the cultural background and touched a little bit on the logic of the humoral system in previous videos, so if you're interested in those and haven't seen them yet, be sure to check them out. But now we want to start getting into the actual physiology and pathology. How is the body constructed? How did it work? How was it conceived of? What was health? What was disease? We want to start moving from the abstract into the literal, the physical and the pragmatic. But we can't, just yet. It just wouldn't make any sense. We need a starting point, and that starting point is theory. And we're going to go pretty deep with it, talking about Plato's Tripartite Soul, Aristotle's Four Causes, and Hippocratic Materialist medicine, and how all of that is synthesized together into one functional medical system by Galen of Pergamon. Now, because we're going to go pretty deep with this is either going to be really interesting or it's going to be really boring. I guess we'll find out. And for those new to the channel, I'm not a scholar, I'm an herbalist. But I'm not even a humoral herbalist. I'm a Chinese medical herbalist. I don't know of any truly humoral herbalists out there. I don't know if they really exist anymore outside of the Middle East and parts of India. And in India, humoralism takes a backseat to Ayurveda anyway. So I can't think of any, and I can't think of any actual scholars of humoral medicine. I know that there are a lot of medical historians, but that's a totally different thing. So if you know of any clinical practitioners or scholars of humoral medicine, let us know. And ultimately what this means is that we're on our own. So as much as I want to get everything right, I might get some things wrong. And if I do, and you know more, then let us know in the comments. And of course, before we get in, if you like these kinds of deep dives, feel free to like, share, and subscribe, etc. I could say this really helps out the channel, but I'm doing this for myself anyway. So like I said, you can't just start talking about humoral medicine in terms of humors, pneuma, spirits, and faculties. We need a backbone of theory to build upon. And the theory is not just theory. Theory is also worldview. Theory is based on something. People don't just make shit up. I mean, they do. Everything's made up. Not to get too philosophical, but self-concept and self-identity are entirely made up. So, of course, the mental models and maps arising out of self-concept, the worldview, are absolutely going to be made up. So that being the case, what makes one model true versus another? Humoral medicine is just a model. Modern medicine is just a model. Same with Chinese, Ayurveda, and all indigenous medicines. They're just models, no matter how triumphal the adherents of the models are. They're just models, and models are only true in a relative sense, and only insofar as they reflect how a culture parts and parcels reality. And that's true from the mythopoetic and archetypal to the materialist and reductive. They're just models, and models are only partially true. So how does a culture or science part and parcel reality? That's an important question, because all of the models built on it going forward are going to be built upon how you answer that question, because that's worldview. And that has particular relevance here because medicine can be thought of as an application that's built on the operating system of a particular philosophy. And there are some parallels here in that just as the human mind seeks confirmation in the outside world of its internal beliefs, natural philosophy does the same thing with medicine. So it's important to know the underlying natural philosophy going in, because all of the assumptions of the medical system are going to rest upon it. So what is medicine? It is, in the abstract, in my entirely personal opinion, an attempt to explain humanity's place in the cosmos informed by observations of objective experience. In a very real way, it is the reconciliation of mental models with external reality, proved or disproved within the ever-changing phenomena of the physical body. Of course, you want to get better, but what illness is, what health is, and how you move from one to the other is a moving target. And medicine is a lot of seeing what works and then trying to explain why. And these different mental models are why you can have a situation, for example, where modern medicine says a lab value like blood pressure, independent of physical symptoms, is ill health. And then you can have traditional medicine say a physical symptom is ill health independent of lab value, because a lab value doesn't plug into any kind of classical theory. And both are right, and both are wrong. And the consequence of exclusively following either line of thinking is modern medicine tends to ignore physical symptoms and very often labels them psychosomatic. It has a very hard time dealing with subjective experience, i.e. quality of life. And classical medicine doesn't even have a way to understand a lab value, so it becomes inconsequential. Or worse, practitioners try and overcompensate, and the lab value suddenly dictates treatment in a way that goes against theory, like using an herb for blood pressure lowering effects when that particular herb is actually contraindicated to the specific person's classical diagnosis. So what this means is that however much you think you're starting with physical reality, like a body or an organ, you're actually starting with an idea. You're starting with an assumption. And yeah, even modern medicine, which is supposed to be as objective a medical system as you can get, starts with ideas and assumptions. It has, for example, a strong assumptive bias in scientific materialism from the Age of Enlightenment. For example, function is seen to be a consequence of form. The body is a machine. Consciousness is accidental in the sense that there is no purpose or meaning to it, and causal only in the sense that it is governed by predictable chemical processes and external pressures, and therefore there is no agency or free will. And that worldview sounds fun. And we could elaborate further on the worldview of modern medicine. We could say that we're taking scientific materialism and then we're adding to it capitalism. After all, we live in a pill-popping culture where healthcare isn't a right, especially in the United States. The patient is a number, or more to the point, a collective measurement of GDP. And in the most important ways, the patient is not a human anymore, not a human being. So we're taking that and then we're adding to it a battlefield mentality born out of the Napoleonic, the Civil, and World Wars. And this shouldn't really be a surprise. I mean, Hippocrates supposedly said, "He who wishes to be a surgeon should go to war." And that becomes the later modern phrase that more people might be familiar with, which is war is the mother of surgery. And the consequence of this leads to the attitude that the body is a collection of parts to remove or swap out. So modern medicine also has a kind of militaristic anti-foreign sentiment. And let me explain this. Growing up in the 80s, people used to refer to taking antibiotics as nuking the bug. And when someone says nuking the bug as if that's the best thing to do and there's no collateral damage, that says a lot about that person's healthcare mentality. And we can compare this to assumptions of health and disease from, for example, 2nd century China, which said that disease is a result of disharmony. And you don't necessarily harmonize by just killing something. And of course, we see this modern anti-foreign fear also in the alternative health crowd. And this shows up with a profound fear of pathogens. So for a while, it was parasites and then Candida. And I'm not saying that these aren't possible. And I'm not saying that if a person has parasites, they shouldn't take an anti-parasitic. Same with Candida. But what I am saying is that this reflects a worldview. And that worldview seeks external confirmation. For example, if a person is profoundly tired after eating, independent of any other symptoms, what are the assumptions that somebody makes right off the bat? Are they toxic? Do they need to purge and cleanse? Do they need to get rid of something? Or are they actually weak, needing to supplement with some kind of digestive support to stoke the digestive fire? Do they have dysbiosis, needing antibiotics? Or do they need probiotics? Or are they just stressed and eating causes a parasympathetic crash? So there are a lot of different ways to interpret the same symptoms, and how you interpret them is based on underlying assumptions. And the nuking the bug approach to me screams a profound fear of the other, with distrust of one's ability to regulate one's own borders and sense of self, which is pretty much the same thing. Taken all together, my opinion is that modern medicine is 21st century technology and therapeutics, which can work really well with a 19th century imperialist and colonial worldview. And I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing, and this is all entirely my opinion, but I do think this is what it is. And we should recognize the underlying assumptions of this worldview and not assume that they are kind of baseline, not assume that they are some kind of absolute truth. Because this is important when looking at other medical systems, because their assumptions are totally different. Modern medicine is materialist. There is no purpose to anything. Humoral medicine is teleologic, which means there is a purpose to everything, be that the cosmos, the world, or the human being. And it was teleologic because the natural philosophy of the time was also teleologic. So there is a purpose to all things, and because there is a purpose, there is a design, which requires order and structure. This means that the underlying worldview of that culture in that time was also one of order and design, and this reflected in politics and civics, medicine, and self-conceptualization. And that's pretty different than what's going on right now. So scientific materialism says there is a what, but there's no why. Ancient humoralism says there is not only a why, but the why is what causes the what. And we can describe it like this. Materialism, in a sense, pushes form, or the human organism, the cosmos really, pushes it forward from the past, because everything is built upon what came before. Teleology, on the other hand, because it is a design or a purpose, is more like the future pulling the present towards it. And materialism and teleology are completely, and I would say reactionarily, opposed. After all, materialism arose as a direct refutation of the teleologic philosophy, so of course it's a reaction. So who was right? Who cares? Acausal and causal are just different ends of a spectrum. And when acausal and causal become the extremes of nihilism and eternalism, they're still just different ends of a spectrum. But it's the same spectrum. And really, these are just different philosophies, and no philosophy will ever describe reality. Because as the sages and mystics of all religions confirm, reality cannot be described. It can only be experienced. But that's a completely different tangent for another time. And the point is for us to really look at the assumptions of any system so that we can know what their biases are and how they came to the conclusions they did. Because all medical systems seek to prove or disprove assumptions of reality in the theater of the physical body. So when we look at humoralism, we can ask, why did their medicine work the way it did? What was the theory built on? What did it say about the human body, the human experience, and the cosmos? So again, I know I've gone over this briefly in the Logic of the Humors video, but I realized I need to spend more time on foundational theory before we can do anything else. So getting into it, the best way to present this is big picture first. Humoral medicine synthesizes three different theories or systems. One, it takes Plato's Tripartite Soul as an overarching organizing framework. Two, it combines this with Aristotle's formal and efficient causes. And three, it puts these in the model of the physical structure of the body from Hippocratic Materialist medicine. This synthesis was accomplished by Galen of Pergamon, which is why Greek humoral medicine is more rightly called Galenic Humoral Medicine. And this synthesis brings things together that really don't want to be together. Plato's Tripartite Soul was conceptual, not biologic. Aristotle's natural philosophy was teleologic, but Hippocratic medicine was materialist, the opposite of teleologic. So how did Galen do it? Let's take a look at Plato's Tripartite Soul first. Plato viewed the soul as the principle of life, motion, and self-governance in a living being, that which causes and directs all activity from within. It pre-exists the body and survives the body. And in postulating a tripartite soul, he's not saying there are three different souls. Rather, he's saying there is one soul with three aspects or functions that relate to areas of the body. The tripartite soul, then, is a hierarchy of powers. Plato gave this division of souls a location, but this location, while it existed, reflected more of a morality. It didn't really reflect physiology so much. The rational soul located in the head was guarded by the spirited soul of the chest, which held the appetitive soul of the base impulse at bay. He even viewed the diaphragm as a physical barrier between the appetitive and the spirited soul to keep them separate. In a teleologic worldview in which form arises to express an order and design, the soul is the organizing principle that guides the creation and expression of the body in physical form. You could say it was the cause of the body. Aristotle said, great, that explains why, but it doesn't actually explain how anything comes into being. And so he theorized and made explicit something he termed the causes, which were a step-by-step way you get from nothing to something. And this is final cause, what's the ultimate purpose of something, which requires an efficient cause, which is the way or manner in which something is created. In other words, how. And this efficient cause requires a formal cause, which is the design of something. And the formal cause requires a material cause, which is the substance you're working with. So final cause requires efficient cause, which requires formal cause, which requires material cause. And the way I'm describing this makes it sound like it's a step-by-step process. But really, these causes were all seen to happen simultaneously. So looking at this from the ground up, the material cause is, of course, the physical matter that form is built out of. And the soul acts as all the other three causes together, the formal, efficient, and final. The formal cause defines the kind of organism something is. It gives the body its identity and structure and determines which powers and faculties are possible. The efficient cause is the inner source of movement, change, and activity. And the final cause is the reason for the organism's functions and structures to exist at all. It is its telos. Plato locates this soul principle in a separate realm of forms. Aristotle treats it as immanent in the living body. So now that we've established the causes, we have to explain how they work. We have to expand upon the efficient cause because that is the way in which things are made, i.e. the how. The efficient cause, how something comes into being, in other words, the processes, occurs through what are called faculties or powers. These are the distinct capacities by which the soul carries out different kinds of activity. For Aristotle, these faculties or powers are nutritive or vegetative, perceptive or sensorial, appetitive or desiring, locomotive, which is motor, and rational, which is intellective. The faculties or powers are kind of like jobs or responsibilities or potentials. They don't actually have the power to do anything, and that terminology then is kind of confusing. They need to be transmitted through some kind of medium. And what they are transmitted through are the pneuma, or the pneumata, I should say, and elemental temperature and moisture in the site of the organs and the tissues. All that being said, when we're talking about causes, these don't occur just in the body as a whole. Every organ and tissue also has its own causes. The body is not a homogeneous lump of flesh. So all the organs and the tissues have their own final cause, efficient cause, formal cause, and material cause. And lastly, we'll elaborate on the material cause in Aristotle's theory, and that relates to the four humors, the yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood, which are linked to the four elements in terms of temperature and moisture qualities. The four humors are the material cause. They are the building blocks that organs and tissues are made out of, and being the building blocks, they determine the end product. It's not just the final cause or the formal cause, the point of something being and the plan of it being, but the material that something is made of determines the end product as well. So if you have shitty, poor quality substrate that you're working with, you're going to have shitty, poor quality end product. That's important later in health. And because they shape the end product, they also shape the quality of the faculties or the powers that act through the end product. So that means the humors shape not only the physical form of the organ, but by extension, how well the organ can do its job. To sum all of this up, we have the soul is the final and formal cause, the purpose and the grand design, and the ultimate efficient cause, that which initiates and orders living activity. The faculties are the proximate efficient causes. They are the soul's powers, the proximate modes in which its efficient causes are specified. and it's specified in terms of nutrition, perception, appetite, locomotion, and rationality. Then we have the organs and spirits, which are the instrumental causes, that which carry the powers of the faculties, such as the pneuma and the four elements. And then we have the humors, the material causes, the underlying matter and temperament that condition how well those instruments can function. So that's Plato's tripartite soul and Aristotle's four causes. And Hippocratic medicine didn't care at all about that. It was a purely materialist theory. It didn't care about why. All it cared about was how. How are things supposed to work? How are they not? How do you fix it? But their theory to describe how things worked or broke down and then how to fix them actually relied upon the humors. So there is overlap with Aristotle. But while there is overlap, the humors in Hippocratic medicine weren't a kind of metaphysics as with Aristotle. Instead, they were matter, they were material. And so Hippocratic medicine was a descriptive, diagnostic, and prognostic framework that explained physiology and disease through the balance of the humors, the temperament of organs, and then further through influence of diet, climate, and activity on the body's observable states. Now, getting back to Galen. Galen was the great systematizer. Galen's goal was to create a single medical theory that would not only be clinically effective, but legitimized by the natural philosophy of Plato and Aristotle. This was because there were a lot of competing medical theories at the time, and Galen thought his was the best. But that's a different conversation. Galen created a grand medical unified theory of everything. And to do this, he took all of this, Plato's tripartite soul, Aristotle's causes and faculties, and Hippocratic medicine's humors, organs, physiology, pathology, and diagnostic and prescriptive system, and put them all together to create a new version of humoral medicine, which was Galenic Humoral Medicine. First, he took the Platonic hierarchy of the soul, the tripartite soul, and turned it into a tripartite physiologic scheme with three organ centers that had certain functions, certain physiologic functions. He essentially altered it from a moral theory to a physiologic model of three physiologic centers, three organ-based powers, three kinds of pneumatic activity. Plato theorized that the rational soul was located in the head, the spirited or the vital was located in the heart or chest, and the appetitive or nutritive was located in the liver and gut. Galen rightly realized that while this was a good start, it wasn't enough to really explain what was going on in the body. He needed to do several things. He needed to keep the location of the souls and the basic hierarchy, convert it from a moral hierarchy to a hierarchy of body governance, give the spirits in the hierarchy responsibilities, and give the spirits in the hierarchy powers to complete their responsibilities. After all, you don't want your spirit stuck in middle management with all of the responsibility to get something done, but no power to do it. So we keep the same location, then rename the spirits to reflect the physiologic aspect. So the rational, spirited, and appetitive becomes the animal, vital, and natural, or vegetative. Then we say that each of these has a job with responsibilities, and we'll call those faculties, or powers. Then each of them has the power to execute those faculties, and we'll call those powers spirits, or pneumata. We rename the souls as spirits because Galen saw them not as immortal, but as subtle material aspects of the body that perish on death. In doing all of this, Galen is starting to explain the how of how a system works. Of course, Plato's Tripartite Soul explained the why, but as Aristotle also noted, not the how. And so to complete the picture, Galen borrowed Aristotle's explanation of the how, the causes, and applied it to the three-spirit division. Aristotle said the soul is the formal cause of the living body, its organizing principle, the ultimate efficient cause, the source of motion and activity, and the final cause, the end purpose of the organism. Galen observed that an ultimate efficient cause, which is supposed to be the source of motion and activity, is great in the abstract, but it doesn't actually describe much of what's happening in the body. And therefore, great in the abstract, but sucks in terms of treatment. I mean, what do you do with the diagnosis of your ultimate efficient cause is failing? So he reasoned there must not only be an ultimate efficient cause, but a proximate efficient cause, which is how action is differentiated in the body. And the natural thing is to say it's differentiated according to the three spirit centers. The ultimate efficient cause is the source of motion and activity. The proximate efficient cause is the aforementioned faculties. And the instrumental cause is the spiritus or pneumata, so the way in which something gets done. But clinically, you can't have one without the other. So to say natural spirit is also really to say natural faculty. And I think in the Middle Ages, they more or less just conflated those terms together. So let's talk about these faculties for a moment, these proximate efficient causes. The natural, vital, and animal faculty are a kind of macro faculty, and they're termed the governing faculties. And these governing faculties govern body systems. They have their own locations, overarching functions, and processes. The natural faculty is linked to the natural spirit located in the liver and is in charge of nutrition, growth, and blood making. The vital faculty has the corresponding vital spirit, is located in the heart, and is in charge of the pulse, of heat distribution, and ultimately life. And the animal faculty, with the corresponding animal spirit, resides in the brain and is in charge of sensation, thought, and volitional movement. And this is the skeletal framework, as one works from the design or purpose of the soul or body into the actual construction of it. And I'm saying soul here, even though the concept of soul doesn't figure into humoral medicine. Humoral medicine is materialist after all, but it's still teleologic, so it still asserts the body exists for some reason. And that reason is more or less undefined. Galen himself didn't weigh in on the matter of whether there was an immortal soul or not, because he said he didn't have any proof either way, so he didn't really care. But the philosophy of purpose first sees an organization of the body from abstract design or intention to larger organizing structures that reflect this design or intention, and then moves into smaller and smaller as it approaches material form. Speaking of, what we have so far doesn't at all describe any of the actual organs or tissues of the body, how they work together, or any of the humors that humoral medicine is named after. And in true humoral fashion, we have to talk about the causes first. Where the proximate efficient causes are the governing faculties linked to the animal, vital, and natural spirit, and thus the organ systems, these proximate efficient causes, the animal, vital, and natural spirit, don't govern the organs themselves. For this, you need more causes. You need subordinate proximate efficient causes. In other words, you need subordinate faculties. And these subordinate faculties are called natural faculties. And this is discussed in Galen's work entitled On the Natural Faculties, or De Naturalibus Facultatibus. The subordinate faculties are attractive, the cause of movement toward the organ; retentive, the cause of stability within the organ; alterative, the cause of qualitative change or assimilation; expulsive, the cause of movement away from the organ. So we see these are different than Aristotle's faculties, which were nutrition, perception, appetite, locomotion, and rationality. And they were different because Galen created more of a hierarchy of faculties, whereas Aristotle did not so much. So at any rate, be careful not to confuse them. Aristotle's faculties and Galen's faculties are not the same. These natural faculties describe how something happens on an organ and tissue level. And these faculties are the same for every organ and tissue. But what that means as far as what the organ does depends upon the organ itself. So, as an example, the power of attraction brings food to the stomach and intestines. Retention holds it to be acted upon, alteration changes it, and expulsion moves it on. And this happens in every organ after that organ's own fashion and purpose. And these subordinate faculties are subordinate to a respective governing faculty, which coordinates the whole thing. And just as the governing faculties or powers need a medium to act through, which is the pneumata, these subordinate faculties need a medium to act through as well. And this medium is the temperature and moisture of the four elements. So we see that on the level of the higher organization of the animal, vital, and natural, the faculties act through a kind of subtle material, vapor, or gas called pneuma or pneumata. So there is a level of abstraction the farther away you get from matter, and the closer you get to soul or purpose. The medium and driver of power, the instrumental cause, is the body's own processes. But on the level of lower organization of the organs themselves, in the guts and gross material form, the instrumental cause is a function of the structure of the cosmos itself, the four elements and their interactions. And how the four elements act upon the body is through the humors. The humors are what carry the quality of the elements within them to circulate in the body and transmit those qualities to specific organs so they can complete their tasks. For example, yellow bile carries the qualities of heat and dryness, essential in alteration. Black bile carries the qualities of cold and dryness, essential for stability. Phlegm carries the qualities of cold and wetness, essential for balancing the temperature of the yellow bile and for providing fluid lubrication and cooling. And the blood carries the qualities of warmth and wetness, essential for carrying nutrition. The blood also carries the calor innatus, the innate heat or heat of life, essential for body processes, which is converted into the calor instrumentalis in the specific organs. So this is great as a backbone of explanatory physiology, but it's not actually medicine yet. We haven't addressed any of the actual organs or organ functions. We haven't defined health, and so we haven't defined disease. And this is where Hippocratic medicine comes in. Being a biologic materialism, it gives us all of the already working backbone of the organs, tissues, pneuma, the humors, and the diagnostic and therapeutic logic of regimen, purgation, bleeding, and prognosis. This is essentially all plugged into the theory. So in a way, theory is the container. It's the explanation. And it's the reconciliation of natural philosophy and the immediate reality of the direct human experience. It also legitimizes humoral medicine in the eyes of competing schools of the time by taking its authority from Plato and Aristotle. So when all is said and done, Galen synthesizes into a single coherent explanatory model of the body, disease, and treatment Plato's tripartite soul, Aristotle's causal structure and faculty theory, and Hippocratic material physiology and clinical practice. And if all that sounds confusing, it is. And it was a bit to research. These classic texts are not organized the way you would expect. The terminology is confusing, with multiple terms meaning the same thing, sometimes in the same text. There are faculties, which are called powers, but don't actually have the power to do anything in and of themselves, but need a medium to work through, which is their energy source. Aristotle postulates causes. Galen takes those and makes them different, takes Plato's soul and changes those, expands Aristotle's efficient causes into governing and subordinate, and does not really do a great job of explaining this in his On the Faculties, and stops halfway through the text in his explanation just to talk shit about other medical schools. So it's a bit to get through and reorganize. So if I got anything wrong, I trust someone will correct me. But now we've laid out a basic structure. We've started to define body systems and organize them into a dependent hierarchy. At this point, Humoralism has defined what the systems are, what they do, how they do it, and where they're located. And this is the skeleton, so to speak, upon which everything else hangs. And this is great as an organizing structure and great as a point of theory because it connects the teleologic purpose of being, the final cause, with how that purpose is enacted in the body by virtue of the efficient and formal causes, and links that to the actual substance of the body, the material cause. Now that we finally have the backbone, we can finally talk about how the things actually work together. How do the organs work? What's their functions? What is health? What is disease? What are the humors? We've been talking about humoral medicine, but we've barely mentioned the humors at all. And it's weird, when we hear about humoral medicine, we hear that health and disease are all about balancing the humors, these fluid substances in the body. And the way it's often presented most of the time sounds like people are talking about the body like it's a bottle of salad dressing. You've got to have the right ratio. Too much yellow bile, which is hot and dry, and a person is irritable with heartburn and bad breath and high blood pressure. They're full of piss and vinegar, as they say, which is kind of a humoral description, actually. But you can see that the theory of the system is pretty wide and deep. So why focus on just this one aspect, this thing called the humors? Why not focus on the pneuma? Why isn't it pneumism or any other thing? This is because on the spectrum of incarnation, pulling material form into the body and transforming it into the body itself is the only place you can work. It's the only place you can affect change. The layer of the material cause is the only thing you have influence over. Once something is formed, it's already created. There's nothing you can do about it. It's like fingers or hair. It's not too hard to make somebody's brittle fingernails strong, at least not from a Chinese medical herbal perspective. Blood building formulas do that. But you can't change the existing nail. It's already been made. You have to grow it out and replace it with better tissue. It's the same with everything. Organs, tissues, blood, pneuma. All of this is built off of the substrate of the humors. So if you want to treat pathology, that's the only place you can work, with the building blocks, not the building. And those building blocks are the humors. And that's why this is called humoral medicine. So if you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. It's nice to be able to geek out and share interesting topics like this. And if you're interested in more classical herbal and medical theory and practice, be sure to like and subscribe. for a lot more to come. Thanks.